Hi, this is Margo. This is Tuesday evening, July the 2nd, 2019, 7:08 p.m. Pacific Time, United States of America. So I'm getting kind of a late start tonight, so we're just going to go over earthquakes. And I'm just still keeping up with the lake level at the Oroville Dam, though, so it's been retreating or going down. And as of 7 p.m. Pacific Time today, the lake level is at 893.83 feet and falling, and we can see that the outflow has been increased to about 8,800, around 8,800 cubic feet per second. The inflow has been fluctuating. The lowest we're seeing here is 1365 at 9 o'clock this morning, and then it's been up and down. The highest was 5,018 at 3 o'clock this afternoon. At the 6 o'clock reading, the inflow was 4428. So there's that. So we're going to go on over to Usgs, and I have all magnitudes for the last 24 hours pulled up, and we're showing 283 earthquakes on the map today. And of those, 29 are 2.5 magnitude or higher. So the number of larger earthquakes has gone down, but we're still seeing quite a high number of earthquakes. And they had the eclipse that went over. It was total eclipse of the sun that went over Argentina today, and I got very tired during the eclipse. Very tired. I'm a little hoarse because I've been dealing with going through stuff that's I'm kind of, stuff that was packed away that I'm having to clean and sort and shred and declutter and stuff like that. So I worked on that this afternoon, making a little bit of headway, and it's all part of getting my physical and spiritual house in order to get ready to leave the planet, because not everybody's going to leave at the same time, and so some people will leave before others, and if I leave before people that are supposed to take care of things leave, then I don't want as much for them to have to deal with. So here I am doing that in the end days. So it's helping me let go of 3D as well, and it's kind of like a life review, so I recommend it to people if you're wondering what to do, how to spend your last weeks or days or months or however long we have. I do recommend it. It's a good way to do a life review and kind of see where you've been and kind of, take stock and really look at what's important to you now. And realize that you're not going to take anything with you. So what are you going to take mentally and emotionally and spiritually, and do you need to do some other things like tying up relationships and tying up all kinds of loose ends that are just dangling that you didn't want to deal with, because this is part of showing our strength and our integrity at the end too. So anyway, we've got of these 2.5 magnitude and higher earthquakes. There was a 2.8 that came in at Hawaii at 7:36 last night. I don't know if that's an overlap, if I showed that last night or not. So in the last 24 hours, so we'll just start with Hawaii. In the last 24 hours, there have been 2 larger earthquakes at 2.8 near, no, I showed this because there was another one up here too. Because Kilauea is here. This is the crater at Kilauea, so it was to the northwest of Kilauea that came in at 7:36 last night. And then later on there was a 3.7. This is on the flank of Kilauea that came in at 12:37 last night. Now if we look at 2.5 magnitude, I mean all magnitudes, I'm sorry, I'm a little out of it, I'm really tired. We're showing 17 here on Hawaii today. So that's a high number, and we're seeing quite a cluster of 9 right here. We saw a couple right here. They were in between Kilauea and Mauna Loa, like on this kind of crest. And now we have 9 right here. So let's just go through those first. 2.8, 1.0, 0.9, 0.9, 0.9, 1.8. That's at a negative 1.6 kilometer depth. 0.9 at a negative 1.4 kilometer depth. 0.9 and a 2.0. And when you see those negative depths, it means that the epicenter of the earthquake is up in the mountain or in the chamber. If it's a volcano, or if it's an old volcano that's dormant, that means there's magma moving, and it's moving up in the chamber. And so what this is showing me is that there are these magma tubes that are connecting underneath these volcanoes, and where the volcanoes are is where it's popped out like a pimple that had to be burst and ruptured. And so like these are pimples, and then so that's where it ruptures more easily. And then but there's magma flowing in between these normal pimples, and then it bursts out like in these other locations too, and it moves up into the chamber. So that's what the minus depth on that is. Then over here near Kilauea was a 1.8 at 8:11 this morning. This is at a -2 kilometer depth. Here's a 1.7 in the crater of Kilauea. Here's that 3.7 on the flank of Kilauea. Here's a 2.4 and a 1.8 kind of on the flanks of Kilauea. Then down here at Pahala was a 2.2 and a 1.9. And then here's one in the ocean off the coast of Pahala that was a 1.9. So this is a lot of activity, and it's higher, higher numbers, and also larger magnitudes. That 3.7, that's one of the largest ones we've seen here in a while. In addition to, there were some large ones here today. So we could see something take off there soon. We could see something happen very soon there in Hawaii. So let's go back over to 2.5 magnitude now. And see what the next one is. Okay, this one's coming off at 9 o'clock, so we have time to start wherever we like. So I'm going to start over here in Guatemala. There was a 4.5 that came in on land near Chahul, Guatemala at 5:55 this afternoon. And when you see this 10-kilometer depth on everything, that's a default depth that the Usgs puts in here when they don't know the depth or they don't want to report on it. And so when you see a whole bunch of people looking at Usgs and they're not familiar with it, and they say, oh, all these are 10 kilometers depth. Oh, you know, that means something. No, it means that's their default. It means that we don't know how deep it was. And all these times I'm going to be telling you are Pacific time because that's my time zone. Then down here, now this is, along here is where the eclipse happened. And there was a 4.0 near Ovalle at 8:17 this morning, and a 4.1 near San Antonio de los Cobras, Argentina at 7:57 this morning. This one was deep. It was 244 kilometers deep. And the deeper they are, the less you'll feel shaking on the surface and the less damage they'll make on the surface, but the more they will cause these tectonic plates to move around the world. And coming across the Pacific, there was a 5.2 in the Kermadec Islands region at 9:07 last night, and a 4.8 near L'Esperance Rock, New Zealand at 9:24 last night. So those were just minutes apart. And then up here was a 5.6 near Lota, Solomon Islands at 1 o'clock this morning. Then here was a 5.1 on land near Mindy, Papua New Guinea at 7:53 this morning. Now let's look at the little wave and see if there were any tsunami warnings on any of these. There have been two warnings posted, or two reports, one for Homer, Alaska, a 4.6, and one for Kotzebue, Alaska. Now, I already looked at this Homer, Alaska one, and it said no tsunami danger. And this Kotzebue one just came in. It says no tsunami danger on that one. Alright, so no tsunami danger on this one either. But this could be related to our volcanoes, our Methane volcano, which is right here. See, it's kind of straight across from that. And let's come on around. Then down here we had one just south of Australia, next to the Southeast Indian Ridge, a 5.5 south of Australia. This came in at 12:51 this afternoon. And then here's a 5.8 that happened in the middle of the Indian Ocean. This is on the Carlsberg Ridge where these tectonic plates come together. This was at 2:44 this morning. Then on land, there was a 4.2 near Jarm, Afghanistan that came in at 2:34 this afternoon, 186 kilometers deep. And that's all of the international earthquakes. So not many that were not part of the U.S. territory. We're seeing larger dots up here in Alaska and some larger dots in the United States, the lower 48 as well. So let's go to the Caribbean, and we're only showing 5 here today, so that's a downtick. I'll call them off: a 1.1, 1.6, 1.7, 2.8, that's the largest one, and a 1.3. So that slowed down a lot. And now let's come on up to Alaska. We're looking at all magnitudes. We're seeing 72 here today. We're seeing some larger circles mixed in among the smaller dots. So let's go to our 2.5 magnitude or higher map. And we're seeing 8 here today. So let's just start down here. Here's a 2.5 near King Salmon. Here's a 4.0 at Homer, Alaska. This came in at 1:39 this afternoon. And here's that 4.6 at Homer, Alaska that came in at 12:30 this afternoon. So this one happened first, and then this 4.0 came in. Here's a 3.2 near Willow, Alaska at 4:33 this morning. Now this is not far from Anchorage. Here's a 4.1 near Shishmaref at 6:13 this evening. So that's getting on up there. Lots of 4s. We normally don't see them this high up here. And we have 3 larger ones here at Kobuk today. There was a 4.4 that came in at 11:17 this morning, 3.2 at 11:24 this morning, and a 2.7 at 12:03 this afternoon. And of course we'll see smaller ones where all of these larger ones were probably, but this just gives us a framework to go by. So we can see that the number of larger earthquakes has increased for today in Alaska, and the magnitude has gotten higher as well. Now with all magnitudes in the Aleutian Island chain, we're showing a 2.6 at Unalaska. Here's a new one. Here's a 2.3 near Chirikoff Island. Here's a 2.5 king salmon. We saw those. Here's the ones at Homer, and we can see that's just across the Cook Inlet from Old Iliamna and Redoubt volcanoes. And so we're seeing some activity here. Here's a 2.0 at Redoubt, 1.8, 1.6. Here's another one, a 1.3. So these are definitely things are moving. And here's the Anchorage area. We can see we've had some recent ones here. Here's a 1.9 and a 1.9 at Talkeetna there. Here's that 3.2 at Willow, and that's very, very close. I would consider that in the Anchorage area. I would count that. Here's a 2.1 Valdez. Here's some in the little armpit. Here's some more ice quakes. Look at all of these. We've got 4 right here. 2.3. That's a large one. Here's a 1.9, a 1.8, and a 1.3. So that ice must be melting really fast because of the warmer weather now. Here's a 1.8, Cape Yakataga, 1.5. So we can see that we've got lots of activity here. Northern Alaska is pretty clear. We've got, here's the one at Shishmaref. Here's a 2.1 Shishmaref. And now here's this cluster at Kobuk. Let's go check this out. We've got 22 here today. And here's that 3.2 and the 4.4. Those were the largest ones. And then there was a 2.5 or something. So we're seeing mainly in the ones here. A lot of them are at the surface. When you see the 0 kilometer depth, it means that the epicenter is at the surface. And they have huge mining operations here. So this is kind of not surprising, but it's kind of disturbing to see it clustering day after day. It's kind of like seeing the geysers every day. So anyway, now coming on down into the lower 48, we've got 173 here today. So we're going to start over here in this New Madrid hazard zone. We've got a 2.3 at Tiptonville, Tennessee that came in at 7:26 this morning. Then here in Oklahoma, we've got 6 here today. 1.9 Moreland, 1.7 Fairview, 1.8 Moreland, 1.5 Perry, 1.8 Blackwell, and a 2.7 at Crescent. That's the highest one, or the largest one. Coming across, New Mexico is clear, Arizona is clear, Utah has 2, a 1.6 at Helper, and a 1.6 at Mount Pleasant. And this 1.6 at Helper was at a negative 1.0 kilometer depth. So you know what that means. We just talked about that. Then, okay, that's in Washington, so I'm going to move that over so that's not on our map. Now in the Yellowstone area, we're showing 4 today. We've got 2 at Virginia City, a 0.7 and a 1.3, and then a 1.4 near Old Faithful Geyser, and a 1.2 near Challis, Idaho. So that's kind of slowed down movement-wise. Next, coming into the Pacific Northwest, okay, I want Oregon and Washington on the map. We've got 13 here today, and being a Tuesday, the earthquake makers are back at work. See these little diamond shapes? That's where explosions or quarry blasts have happened. Now before we look at those, I have the tremor map pulled up from yesterday. That's our latest data we can get, and we're showing 170 epicenters yesterday, and they're clustered in 4 places. There's a cluster up here on northern Vancouver Island, and then there's a cluster down here in near Eugene, Oregon, and then there's another cluster between Roseburg and Medford, Oregon, and then there's a huge cluster in Northern California in Shasta National Forest, just to the west of Mount Shasta. Huge cluster there. And these are harmonic tremors, and this is what happens with this is measurement of ground movement before it reaches the level of an earthquake, and these are recorded. So here we have, I'm sure these explosions don't help matters any. Here's a 1.5 explosion at Airway Heights at 4:22 this morning. They got an early start. Here's a 2.0 explosion near Granite Falls, Washington at 1:14 this afternoon. Here's a 1.5 explosion near Cle Elum at 4:27 this afternoon. And then down here in Oregon is a 1.7 explosion near Bunker Hill at 10:35 this morning. And now let's just zoom into these to the real earthquakes. And this is Mount St. Helens, and it looks like we've got 3 at Mount St. Helens, and then the rest of them are to the northwest of there at Morton. But this is in the Mount St. Helens area. So we've got 9 here today. So here's the Mount St. Helens ones, or Amboy is the name of the town. And 2 of these are right in the crater of Mount St. Helens. We've got a 0 magnitude here. We've got a 0.3 and a minus 0.4. And when it gets into the minus range, that's a microquake. And then at Morton, we've got 6. We've got a 1.8, 0.9, 1.0, 0.7, 0.9, and 0.7. Right next to Riff Lake and Bossy Rock. Morton is up there. Alright, now let's come on down to Northern California. And of note are these three that have come in right here on our pivot point where these three red lines meet up. This is the San Andreas fault line, and this is the Cascadia subduction zone. This is the Juan de Fuca plate, and this is the Pacific plate. And where all these come together is a fulcrum point of pressure, and so we see lots of activity here. Hold on. So these are near Petrolia, so let's look at these first. Petrolia and Ferndale. Here's a 2.4. They're calling it near Ferndale at 5:59 this afternoon. Here's a 2.0 near Petrolia at 4:34 this afternoon. And a 1.7 near Petrolia that came in at 9:20 last night. Then look at this line of earthquakes coming almost straight, making a straight line, coming across California through Nevada here. So we've got a 1.7 near Lake Pillsbury, a 1.6 near Hamilton City, a 0.6 at Truckee, a 0.3 at Sun Valley, and then a 1.1 near Fallon. So let's just zoom in and look at this one. Now here's Chico, and people who have been watching my shows for a while know this area because I did a lot of reporting on the Oroville Dam earlier this year, back in May. Here's Oroville, here's the Oroville Dam, here's Lake Oroville, and this earthquake is not very far from Oroville. It's a 1.6, and this came in at 1:37 this morning, and it's kind of, so it's in between. Okay, so Shasta's way up here, so it's definitely in the zone with the Oroville group. So we've done those. Then up here in northern Nevada, we had a rare 3.0 near Battle Mountain at 5:57 this morning. That was 6 kilometers deep. It wasn't that near it. It was 61 kilometers away from Battle Mountain. Here's Battle Mountain down here. So it was up in the mountains. Now there's a lot of mining there, so that could have been from mining. Who knows? I don't know. And then there was one down here, a 1.8 near Ely, and we're seeing more activity down through the state here. Here's one at Hawthorne, Walker Lake, a 0.9. Here's a 1.5 at Tonopah, and a 1.2 at Gabbs. And then we've got these in southern Nevada that are small under ones, so that's kind of normal to see those. It's not normal to see nothing down there. Coming on down into Mammoth Lakes, we've got 8 here, and the largest one is this 2.3 near Wilkerson. Then we've got a cluster of 3 over here, 1.9 and a 1.0 and a 0.6 all at Big Pine. And here's a lone one of 0.3 at Lone Pine. Then in the Coso Junction area, we've got 11 here today. It looks like this 1.5 is the largest one. So that's showing movement. Let's get this group coming down. 1.0 at Bodfish, 1.5 to Tehachapi, 1.3 to Tehachapi. Here's a 1.5 quarry blast at Mojave. Here's a 1.1 quarry blast at Appleville, 1.2 Lake Hughes, 1.4 Fraser Park. Got that. And what is this cluster? Oh my gosh. Look at this. 19 here at Grapevine. Well, that's definitely showing movement. Here's a 3.1. Let's look at our 2.5 magnitude and higher map. So here's the Grapevine cluster. So we have 5 that are 2.5 magnitude or higher. We've got a 2.8 that came in at 3:03 this afternoon. A 2.5 at 3:12, 3.1 at 3:21, 2.6 at 3:22, and a 3.2 at 3:40. So let's see when these others happened. This 2.8 was the first one at 3:03, and then they kept going until 5:56. The last one was this 1.7 at 5:56. So 19, and there were a lot of 2s and 2 in the 2s range, and then in the 1s range. Like 1.5 it looks like is the lowest one. So I don't know what they're doing there, but all within about a 2-hour period. And then we've got 2 here at Yucca Valley, a 1.0 and a 1.4. So in Southern California, I'm going to take that quarry blast off. We've got 27 here today. So that's a downtick, but Grapevine made up for it. Here's a 1.0 at Anza. Let's look at Glen Avon. We've got 11 on the map here today, including these over here at Loma Linda. The highest one is this 1.9 at Glen Avon. Here's a 1.3 quarry blast at Lake Elsinore. And so on. Let's move on up. 1.7 Lopez Point, 2.9 New Idria at 10:48 this morning. That's getting up there. 1.3 Pinnacles, 0.9 Hollister, 2.1 Pacifica, 1.2 Hayward, 1.1 Blackhawk. Here's a 0.9 Quarry Blast near Clayton, 2.3 Calistoga. We saw this one at Lake Pillsbury, and now the geysers has 42 here today, so that's an uptick. Let's see how big these are, if any of these are 2.5 or higher. No. So most of these are under 1. Here's a 2.1. I'll just call off some of the larger ones. Here's a 1.9, 1.9. There's a couple more 1.9s. Most of them are under 1s though. But that's an uptick. So let's see what else came in while we were looking at things. We got a couple of new little ones up here. A 1.9 at Willow and a 1.9 at Talkeetna. I think that's it. So I'll go ahead and wrap this up for tonight, and I just recommend everyone get your spiritual house in order and get ready to exit the planet, because it's going to be a rough ride this summer as things heat up in the Arctic, I think. So it's been a rough ride for a lot of people already, and so until next time, God bless you, go in peace, and I'll talk to you soon. Good night.